Hello, welcome to RC Video Reviews. Today we're taking a look at the TBS Crossfire Micro TX V2 starter set. You know, I realize I'm a little late to the party with Crossfire, but honestly, when I left Arizona, I kind of got away from FPV for a while, but I just have rekindled my interest in it, and I've re-examined what's going out there in terms of hardware, and it looks like a lot of fun. I was tired of missing out, so I went out and got myself a Maytech F722 flight controller. I got myself the TBS Crossfire starter kit, which comes with 3 receivers, and of course the Crossfire module. If you're going to fly FPV, you can generally push the plane a little bit farther than you can when you're trying to maintain orientation with an aircraft up close. And for that reason, it's never a bad idea to get one of these lower frequency transmitter sets. They just make sure that you've got a really good lock on control if you're flying your airplane a little farther away than normal. So with that in mind, today we're going to take a look at the Crossfire Micro TX and the receivers, and I'm going to show you how to connect them, bind them, and conduct a firmware upgrade. Hey, if you like the work I do here on RC Video Reviews, please consider joining me on Patreon. For about the price of a cup of coffee, you can help me keep making videos just like this one. If you'd like to help out, there's a link in the description and on your screen. Okay, let's take a look at the TBS Crossfire. You'll notice on this box, I've got 2 copies of the receivers and the antenna. That's because I've already installed one in an aircraft and I didn't want to take it apart. When you buy the starter set, you get 3 receivers, 3 of the Immortal T antennas, and 3 of the micro receiver antennas. You also get this little inverter board that's used on the Taranis Q7. Since I'm using a Radiomaster, I'm not going to use that. If you want to know more about it, read the manual. There's a detailed description on why you need it. It basically has something to do with speeding up the communications between the Crossfire and the radio. For the TX16s, that module is not necessary. If you've never seen one of these devices before, this is an external transmitter module, and it just snaps into the back of your radio if you're flying like a TX16s or a Taranis or a Jumper or something like that. The receivers that come are really tiny. I mean, this is just a little tiny guy. The pins do not come installed. You have to solder those on yourself. And they do that for flexibility, so that if you're using it in a very small device, you don't have to worry about those pins. And they give you sets of wires that let you solder directly onto the board and then onto your flight controller if you want to do that. For me, I kind of like the pins, so I went ahead and soldered the pins on. As far as the antennas go, these Immortal T V2 antennas are the recommended option in terms of range, although there has been some discussion on the RCVR Discord that these little whisker antennas do just as well. So I might do a little bit of testing just to see, but I'm sure in any event the antennas are probably going to be able to fly much farther than I plan on pushing my plane anyway. I mentioned the extra wires that you get in the package, but there's one other thing you get in the package as well, and that's shrink tubing. It's highly recommended after you solder everything up and connect your antenna that you use that shrink wrap to help keep that micro UFL connector locked down for your antenna. That'll keep it from wiggling and coming off. One other thing that I'll point out regarding this arrangement is I soldered my pins on the bottom side of the board, so my wires will come in this way. And there are 2 reasons I did that. One of them was because I don't want that UFL connector fighting with the pins on the way out. So I want to lay that antenna wire going aft toward the pins, and then I'll put the heat shrink on, and that'll help me ensure that antenna stays locked down on that connector. If the pins were on this side, then you'd have to take that antenna wire and make a hard turn to miss the pins. Or you'd lay it in between the pins, and that'd be a really bad idea. I'll also point out that that little silver piece right there, that little tiny black button, is the bind button. You have to use either a tool or you have to have some fingernails to press that thing because it is tiny. Before I bind this, I thought I'd explain some of the key features that Crossfire uses in their marketing material. Obviously, this is long range. This particular unit runs on 2 different frequencies. It's got a 915 megahertz frequency for flying within the United States, and it's got an 868 megahertz frequency for Europe. In the US, it's the ISM band, and in Europe, it's the SRD band. The RF power on the V2 unit goes from 25 milliwatts to 100. And one of the things I really like about this unit is that it's got a dynamic power setting. So you can set the lowest power level necessary to complete the job. And as the aircraft flies, the transmitter looks at the telemetry data and makes decisions about whether or not it needs to increase power. And according to their material, the transmitter will make that choice faster than you can reach around and hit the button. So leaving it in the dynamic mode is a really good way to go. And according to the book, these little receivers only weigh 3.2 grams. Okay, with the first look out of the way, let's install it in the radio and bind it to a receiver. The first thing we'll do is connect the antenna to the receiver on that micro UFL connector. Just make sure you've got it lined up in the right spot, and you just kind of wiggle it a little bit, and when you press it down, you'll feel a very positive snap. And when you do that, just spin it around. And see, this is what I was talking about earlier. I put my pins on this side because I wanted to be able to run my antenna cleanly down the back, and I'll just put my shrink tubing right there on top, and that'll help keep that antenna locked down on that receiver. The next thing we'll do is install the module in the back of the radio. So you simply slide the antenna in between your handle, drop it in there, make sure those pins align, and just give it a press. For this demo, I created a brand new model and I have no configuration in it at all. So I'll just show you real quick. On my model setup screen, none of the radios are turned on. And on my inputs, I've got aileron, elevator, throttle, rudder, same thing on mix, and there's nothing else in this configuration. It's a bone stock configuration on OpenTX. So the first thing you want to do is, after you install the module, is go to your model setup tab and go down to the bottom, and you'll see this option called external RF. Click on that, and you want to set it to Crossfire. CRSF, that's the one you want. And when you do that, it'll give you a channel range and a receiver number. As of OpenTX 2.3.10, they actually track receiver numbers now. So if you want to assign one, you can do that. If you want it to behave like the Fursky receivers, where any model will bind with any model template, you can leave it at 00. It's your choice, but they do support receiver numbers. I'm going to go ahead and assign one just for the heck of it. I'm going to just pick 43. The next thing we'll do is exit out of the model setup, and we'll press the system button. And remember all those videos where I talked to you about Lewis scripts? Now you get a chance to try one out. Scroll down to number 3, which is Crossfire Configure, and press the button. And you'll see XF Micro TX right there. So just click on that, and you'll see an option here: bind, general, max power, dynamic power. These are all the parameters I've already set in my Micro TX. Now, fair warning, yours might look a little bit different because they do give you an option of setting a country code. The reason they do that is because if you move around from region to region, you may have to change the operating band that you're using. I don't move from region to region, so I just set mine for the US zone. And once you do that, it locks in. So if you want the ability to change that, don't select a zone. Leave it unlocked. I don't really care on mine because I'll only fly it in the US. Okay, so we've got our radio set up, and you can see the Lewis script is talking to the transmitter. The next thing to do is give the receiver power. And when we do that, you have to press the bind button within 1 minute. So the first thing we'll do is we'll set bind on the radio, and it says binding. Okay, now I'm going to connect my power plug, and by the way, I'm using an M8S output power, and I've got it on S-Bus monitor. The ground is on the bottom pin near the antenna connection. So it's this bottom pin right here on the same row as that antenna connection. Okay, notice on the radio I've got a confirmation request to update the Micro RX. Hit enter and let the transmitter update the firmware on the receiver. After you hit enter, you should get a status message that says it's updating the receiver, and it'll count from 0 all the way to 100. The message on the screen says RX is loading, don't, and then it flips over to binding. And there we go. Now when the bind procedure is complete, you should get a solid green light just like that. And then notice on the radio it says binding OK. Okay, with the bind process complete, the next thing I want to do is switch the receiver over to use S-Bus just so I can do some testing. And if you're not flying a flight computer that uses Crossfire, you might want to know how to do this as well. On the radio, we're still in the Micro TX setup, so I'll press return to get out of that. And then you can see XF Nano on the screen. That's new since we bound the receiver. So I'll highlight that by scrolling down to it, and I'll press the enter key. And in there, you can see you've got options to configure the receiver. So under mode, it says 8 channel. If you press the enter key, you can flip that to 12. So you can toggle between the two. You can turn telemetry on and off. You can set your RF profile to use dynamic or 50 or 150 Hertz. You can set your fail-safe mode if you want. You can enable NavLink. You can do a factory reset. What I want to do is convert to S-Bus. So notice on the output map, it says on output number 1, it's using Crossfire TX. I'm just going to switch that to S-Bus. But before I do, notice on my toolkit M8S, the S-Bus monitor has all the channels centered at 882. So I'm going to click on the output map number 1, and then I'm going to highlight S-Bus. And when I do that, output number 2 will change by itself. And there's a couple of others down below. We're not going to worry about those. I just want to set output 1 to S-Bus. So here we go. Output number 1. And notice what happened on my S-Bus monitor. All the values centered at 1501, except for my throttle, which is at 990. So I'll move my throttle up just to show you. There we go. We've got throttle. And we've got yaw, elevator, and aileron. There we go. There's proof that we've got a good successful bind and we've got S-Bus output. So now we're done with Lua. We can back out of that. And I'll show you one other little trick that you might want to be aware of. Back all the way out to your main screen and under model setup, go over to your telemetry sensors. And the reason I want to show you this is because I'm queuing you up for the next video. I've got something really cool to show you next time. But for this video, all I'm going to do is hit discover new sensors. And notice there's nothing in there right now. I have no sensors. So when you discover new sensors, you should see the Crossfire populate a whole list of sensors. Some of the key ones are RSSS. There's an ANT sensor that is a testing sensor. It's got receiver signal to noise, transmitter signal to noise, total link quality, RSSI, transmitter power, which is really cool, transmitter RSS, transmitter signal to noise, I mentioned already, and the receiver battery and current drawn. So a lot of telemetry values. Very important to add these because when I show you the next video, you're going to need this information. Okay, that's all I've got on the first look and the bind process for the Crossfire Micro TX. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know new material hits the channel. If you've been hanging around for a while, you guys know what to do. Make sure you leave me a comment, thumbs up, and don't forget to check out my affiliate links in the description. That's all I've got for today. Take it easy.